is that you have this contrast of modes between minor and major. So there's a little bit, it's a little bit easier to hear because of that, because it's easier to distinguish that as compared to, tonic and dominant. But at any rate, this theme would typically be more lyrical, so more song-like, not as animated rhythmically. So I'll put here lyrical. So if I ask you, describe the character of a typical B theme in the first movement of a classical symphony, you would say, typically it would be lyrical. You'll see terms like dolce, which means sweetly. And so that's the typical expectation. And then at the end of the exposition, then you have a fourth section that's called the closing section. And sometimes you'll have a new theme there. Usually it references the material from the beginning of the movement. Usually it's very brilliant, very loud and exciting, and it brings the exposition to this real strong conclusion. And then that would be repeated. So the closing is still in that second key, and the exposition ends in that second key. It's then repeated. And then the next section begins. This section is the section that has the fewest specific expectations as far as keys or what's going to happen. So this is where the composer shows their own unique idea here as far as this movement. The two things that you can expect that will happen are that it will discuss themes from the exposition. So it'll take some ideas that you heard in any of these sections. So we'll use some different terms to describe what's happening. So one of the terms that we'll use is the term motivic thematic development. So let's just write that up here. So a motive is a short thematic unit. So it's something which is intended to be developed. And so in this first movement of the Prague Symphony, we're going to see that Mozart extracts 3 motives from his A theme. And he uses those in the development section. And whereas the texture of Sonata-allegro form is a homophonic texture. It's one of the homophonic forms. So let's write that up here. What Haydn and Mozart do in their development sections very often is to treat them motivically and to extract these little units from the longer themes and to sequence those and very often to combine them in a polyphonic pattern. And so they kind of reintroduce the sense of polyphony in the development sections. All right, the second thing in the development that you expect is that it's going to modulate through closely related keys. So, can you quickly name the closely related keys in C major? What would they be? So if you just go up the, each step of the scale and you build a triad with the diatonic notes, that's going to tell you the closely related keys. So D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor. Those 5 keys are the closely related keys. So classical composers would work within those realms. Romantic composers then are going to extend that and to modulate to more distant keys. And what Romantic composers do is to introduce much more chromaticism. And so chromaticism is something that's always associated with an expressive style, and it's something that is more emotional. So this is the second thing. It's going to modulate through closely related keys. It's not specific as far as which ones or how many, but you expect it to touch on a couple of keys at least. This section is shorter than the exposition. So this is about half to 2/3 the length, typically. So if this is the basic idea, then this, something like that, would be the expectation for the development, that it's half to 2/3 the length. All right, the final passage of the development section then will reach, whether it's a movement that's in a major key or a movement in a minor key, it's going to reach the 5/7 harmony. This is called the retransition. This is the final connecting passage back to a restatement of the opening material. That final section is called the recapitulation. But this final section, retransition, then brings the music back to a statement of the opening again. And that final section is called the recapitulation. So overall, this is a 3-part form: exposition, development, recapitulation. The exposition and the recapitulation have the same material. The only difference is the recap just restates everything in tonic. So you have a theme, and then the term retransition is just like a transition. The only difference is it takes you back to something you've heard earlier in the movement. So you have a retransition here at the end of development because it's taking you back to the A theme being restated. And then a second retransition which relates to this material from the beginning. And this is just now taking you back to a restatement of the B theme, only now it doesn't modulate. It cadences in tonic. B theme is stated in tonic. Closing theme, and then you'll have some kind of coda at the end, which is the final concluding passage. The coda in Mozart and Haydn would be something that was just giving closure and wouldn't be extended at all. It would be relatively brief. With Beethoven, what we're going to see is that Beethoven is going to extend his codas so that they become almost as long or even longer than the development section, and that they even have the nature of a second development, that they're discussing the themes. And that's one of Beethoven's characteristics, is that he's constantly trying to bring out all of the latent personality of a theme and trying to make that manifest, just to develop everything possible. So this is Sonata-allegro form, and we'll look at this on Tuesday, first with that little example. So if you can look at that for Tuesday, and you'll see where the double bars and repeats are. And you'll also see that there's a repeat around the development and the recap. When you're trying to analyze it, it's easy to see what the exposition is because it ends with the double bars. The development begins after the double bars. So the first thing you want to do is look for the recapitulation, which brings back the opening material in tonic. So identify that. Then you can go through and look for the place where it cadences, and where you have the second theme that's presented. And Then in the development section, look to see what it is that's being discussed from the material that you heard in the beginning. So we're going to see this pattern over and over. There are thousands and thousands of movements in Sonata-allegro form. It's the most important form to understand and to be able to discuss. So if you go to graduate school, that's a typical question on an entrance exam. Diagram, classical Sonata-allegro form. So it's really basic, something important to learn, okay? So have a good weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.